With injuries in the Red Sox rotation coming up left and right, we look at some of the best options to fill in those spots.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to welcome you back into the Locked On Red Sox podcast, and thank you so much for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. I am your host, Jake Ignaszewski, and here, as always, with my co-host, NESN, Lauren Willand. And I want to start this episode off by pitching an idea to the Red Sox social media department, because I saw on the Buffalo Sabres TikTok account, they sort of did a replication of the two In Between Two Ferns by Zach Galifianakis, the dry humor TV show that Zach Galifianakis has, where he'll diss some players or he'll say their name wrong, and it's always funny to sort of see how the different celebrities or actors react. And the Sabres did it with two of their players. And honestly, I thought the host that they had, was honestly somebody that they just hired who was, like a creator or a personality in Sabres world. But I can't believe it was actually a player. If you haven't seen what I'm talking about, go and check it out, because it is hysterical. But the reason why I'm talking about this is because with all the personalities that the Red Sox currently have on this team, I think it's a no-brainer to do In Between Two Socks. You literally just put two red socks in between two players, and Kike Hernandez seems like the perfect host to act as the Zach Galifianakis in the video.
Yeah, he does. And you said it, like, the Red Sox have so much personality on this team, and it kind of gives a fun human side of athletes. I love when teams are able to kind of do this, and I see the Bruins do it a lot with on their TikTok. They're able to kind of do it and kind of get inside the heads of the players instead of just kind of hockey. So it would I think it'd be a fun segment. Anything to bring more fun and more personality and more like of the human side of the players, I'm always all for.
And I think you could these two players just came immediately to mind. Rafael Devers, Alex Verdugo. You could do like 2 episodes with one of them. Devers, you could make the whole scoop sort of joke and just hand him like an ice cream cone. And you're like, why aren't you looking? I thought you liked scoop. And then, with Verdugo, TK could just have like all the chains and be like, is this enough or is this not enough? And just sort of just poking fun at the different, things that fans know most of these players by. But I've been loving the content that they've had thus far throughout spring training, the mic'd ups. We even spoke about the race between, Devers and Verdugo that came from the mic'd up video that the Red Sox put out. But it's been nice to sort of have that energy early on in spring training, as we've talked about. And it was also nice to hear, after sort of a scary moment in spring training, have a little bit of positive update. We spoke about it in the later half of yesterday's episode regarding Justin Turner, but it was nice to see him make a tweet last night saying, thanks to everyone for all the messages and prayers. I'm feeling very fortunate to come out yesterday with no breaks and all my chicklets intact. The Red Sox medical staff and Lee Health have been absolutely amazing, and I'm going to be back out on the field as soon as possible.
Yeah, that was really great to see. I know that his wife Courtney had also provided an update shortly after we stopped recording, but that's really good. And it also came out that he didn't have to shave his beard. So I know that's, it's something small, but it's kind of takes into consideration how serious this could have been, because he didn't lose any of his teeth. He didn't have any fractures, which to me is just incredible when you get hit in the face and you don't have any fractures. I don't know if you watched the show, The Challenge on MTV, but on the final, they had slingshots and the girl got hit. It ricocheted, a golf ball hit her right in the middle of the eyes, and she broke her face in like 5 places. And it was just, every time I see someone get hit in the head, I'm like, everything's broken. Like, stuff just had to have shattered. So it's really great to see, his teeth are okay. His face is okay. Obviously there's stitches and swelling, but those will go down and those will go away. And I think that's the most important thing. And that he can start to kind of recover, and he still has a sense of humor. Like, he's happy to have his teeth. And that's one thing I think I'd be worried about if I got rocked in the head with a fastball, I'd be like, all of my teeth here. Like that's what's important to me right now. All my teeth are here.
Yeah, 100%. And, like I said in last episode, I'm just waiting for I didn't think I could get much more ugly than this sort of joke coming from Justin Turner. But, definitely, wishing him a speedy recovery. And, even though it's not the most positive thing that you would like to see in spring training, this could give more opportunities for different players. That is one aspect to look at it with Justin Turner out. Maybe players like, Bobby Dahlbeck, Nico Kavadas could have more opportunities to show off what they could do throughout these spring training opportunities. But, we're going to see some other starters as well have more opportunities to show that they can fill some of these rotation roles. And, one pitcher who was most recently taken out of the game after his first start in a Red Sox uniform, and James Paxton, Cora actually gave a little bit of a positive update on him. He said he's moving well and could play catch tomorrow, all in all trending in the right direction. He said obviously not rushing, but he's able to get on the mound by the end of the week, where we are in a better spot than we thought that we were a couple of days ago. And it's nice with a lot of these injuries so far. It hasn't been as bad as it looks on the surface, not only with Paxton, but also with Bello as well with his forearm.
Yeah, and it's obviously good that you hear that they're progressing well, that things seem to be going in the right direction. And the important thing now, especially because it is still early in spring training, yes, opening day is about 3 weeks away, but you do not want to rush either of these players, especially Bello, when there's such a bright future ahead of him. And that's not a knock on Paxton at all, but he's not a 23, 24-year-old kid now. But you obviously don't want to rush Paxton either. You want him to be as close to 100% as possible. But really good movement on both of these players, especially with Bello when he had the forearm tightness. It's just like, oh God, here we go. Like what next? And then Paxton with the hamstring. So all around good news. That's what you like to hear. It's much better than hearing, oh, he's not going to be able to play. We don't know when he's going to get back on flat ground or back on throwing on the mound. So it's really, really positive, and I'm glad that it's moving in that direction for the both of them. I hope we see them sooner rather than later, but like I said, there's absolutely no need to rush either of them back to this team right now.
I honestly, I just want to see Paxton make 2 starts in a row. Like that's really
Me too.
That's all I'm looking for.
We're not asking for much.
Even when he tried to come back, last season, I think he only, pitched 1 or 2 innings and then had to, be shut down, and then, didn't pitch at all for the rest of the season. And then, his first start in spring training, same thing all over again. And so I think just being able to see that consistency, or, at least just maybe even 3 innings out of James Paxton would be nice to see, but at least he's progressing a little bit quicker than the Red Sox maybe anticipated. But, still with Whitlock, Bello, and Paxton, that leaves 3 spots in this Red Sox rotation to be filled in. And, one thing that we've spoken about all throughout, this offseason is the depth, at least in starting pitching. It could be very critical with this team, with sort of how fragile all these different starters are, and where you don't really know what could come up throughout the season, and so I think being able to have, these different depth pieces, not only in Worcester, but also, stocked up as long relievers in the bullpen is super important. And, one guy specifically, that is, was pitching yesterday, and he's also going to be looked at as, the no-brainer to fill in that spot, I think, is Tanner Houck.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that he was somebody who, when coming into spring training, that they said, no, he's going to be a starter. And it just all of a sudden became, you have 7 or 8 people being like, yeah, he can start. But Tanner Houck, I think, now with the injuries to Paxton, Bello, and Whitlock, and probably not being ready for opening day, but now he kind of has that opportunity to slot in there and show what he's got. He did look pretty strong in his spring training outing. And yes, would you have liked more? Of course, but that's why he'll get more starts and more reps, and we'll see that third pitch there. His slider looked really, really good. Even though he struggled in that outing, that slider was still something that was a high point during his brief time on the mound. So I do think that he is I don't know if no-brainer is the right word, but I do think he's the person that they're going to look to and be like, you're starting. Like, this is your time to prove that you can be a starter. You can start every 5 days. You have confidence in that third pitch. You can get around the batting order more than 2 times and not struggle within that third and fourth time through the order. And I think Houck's up for the challenge. I think, he said it in the beginning of spring training. He's got a chip on his shoulder, and we've mentioned that a lot of players probably are feeling that same way. So coming off the surgery, feeling good and having confidence in that third pitch, I think that if he can kind of put all those things together and on paper he makes a solid starter. He's been called the right-handed Chris Sale, which with the last 3 years you're probably like, okay, maybe he shouldn't be the right-handed Chris Sale, but I think he'll look much better, his second time around, his third time around, once he gets more comfortable. And we still, we have to remember he is coming off the surgery, that he had a disc issue in his back. So that's nothing to play around with. That's a major surgery. So I think that he's got the best probability to slide into that rotation and prove that he's going to stay there if he doesn't want to move to the bullpen.
I think that's a good point with him coming back from surgery, because I feel like, especially after his first start in the spring, walking 4 batters and his control not looking the best, that could put off an alarm in some fans' mind of, oh boy, could there be a control issue with Houck? But it's going to take a little bit for him to be able to get that pinpoint control back and to get back comfortable pitching on the mound regularly as well. And I think especially this is a very critical time for Houck to show the Red Sox that he deserves a long-term commitment. And they've talked about the extension a little bit over the last month or so of a possibility. And I think this is where you really see what you have in Tanner Houck, not only as a starter, but a potential, bullpen piece. And anytime you bring up the Whitlock and Houck sort of debate, everybody wants to see, both of them in the bullpen more. I obviously, I know your stance on Whitlock too. And so, I'm curious to see how in this stint, Houck is really able to perform, because, last season when he made 4 starts, 4.32 ERA, over 16.2 innings. And the one thing that I found very interesting looking at his career as an overall starter, he's only averaged 4.6 innings per game. And, when you really look at it, the third inning and fourth inning is when he really struggled. In the third inning, over 21.2 innings over his career, has a 4.98 ERA, and then the fourth inning, a 3.66 ERA. So we've talked about it. The third time around the order, or the second time hitters are seeing him in the lineup, it doesn't really work out for him great, and that's why we've seen the Red Sox want him to focus more on being a bullpen arm. But this could be his opportunity to audition for some of those spots in the rotation.
Yeah, you said it best, that this could be the opportunity that he has to be a starter on this team. And then that's kind of been his whole MO, right? That he was kind of marketed as a starter, and having that third pitch. I keep going back to this third pitch, but that was the whole big thing. If he was going to be a starter, he needed to develop that third pitch, and he has. And now it's just a matter of him getting more comfortable with that and just trying to attack hitters and go in. And, I know that it's probably really hard when you're on the mound and you start getting knocked around. You get in your own head. You start throwing pitches that maybe you're not comfortable with. You're not locating them as well. But I think now that he's healthy, he's got his back issue taken care of. He's got that third pitch. I think that, and he knows that this is a big spring training and a big first few weeks in the regular season. If he does get into that starting rotation, I do think he'll have a not a super short leash, but he's not going to have all these chances to, right the wrongs. I think that if he starts to struggle and then Brayan Bello's ready to come back, the easy answer there, if Houck is the one struggling, to kind of put him back in the bullpen, maybe kind of get his head right. But you have a lot of guys here, and Tanner Houck is one of them, who could fill the longer inning relief guy. And the Red Sox don't really have one of those pitchers right now. So Tanner Houck could be one of those guys. But I hope they figure out sooner rather than later, because we've talked to pitchers on this show and how it's just so different preparing to be a starter than a reliever. And you just don't want to mess that up 7 different times in the season.
And I think, you could say this about Houck, and then also, the next person that we're going to talk about, Josh Winckowski, but being able to have, one of those longer relievers or a player in the bullpen that has experience as a starter that might be able to, bridge the gap between Houck and the other bullpen arms. If Houck can only go 4 innings, being able to have a guy, like Kutter, Crawford, or Winckowski that's able to go, 2 innings to bridge to that next reliever that's able to come up in out of the pen. So then, you don't just deplete your whole bullpen when you put a guy like Tanner Houck on the mound or something like that, who isn't able to go the long distance like a regular starter is able to. And, Winckowski kind of struggled with that last year too, but he's looked a lot different so far in the spring, pitching 5 innings, only allowing 3 hits, walked 3 batters, but has had 7 strikeouts over 1 start in 2 games. And from what we saw last year from him, I think that when you just look at the stats plainly, you're like, this guy really struggled in his rookie year. But if you also look at the amount of times that he was sent down and called back up and essentially just thrown into a really tough situation, I think you sort of have a little bit of grace for sort of the numbers that you're looking at or for the pitcher. And, maybe he is getting an unfair assessment just from what the numbers are saying, especially with a 5.89 ERA over 14 starts. And I think the one thing that, really stuck out to me is, he'll had a lot of hits, 10.8 hits per 9. And, the strikeouts per 9 at 5.9 compared to 9.1 from what he had in Worcester, drastic difference.
Yeah. And you look at someone like Winckowski, and I peg him as someone too, who was just kind of, you said it, thrown into MLB action to no fault of his own. And we could have said this about a number of pitchers last year, but we did see a lot of, here we go, we saw a lot of potential from him at certain times throughout his starts last year and his outings. And we know that there's something there. And I think the Red Sox know there's something there as well. And if nothing, then he'll be a good depth piece. And we've said it, we've had listeners say this, that you can never have too much depth. And he has looked good. There's been times where I've written stories about how good he's looked, how he's earned praise from Cora and his teammates. And I think that now that he's more comfortable, he's had a full spring training or a full off season, going into a full spring training, kind of knowing more what his role could be, whether that's with the Red Sox, he'll know what his role is with the Woo Sox. And he'll be able to, you said, he's working on a new grip for his slider. Sometimes sometimes it just makes the big difference when you switch up your grip on any sort of pitch and all of a sudden it starts working better for you. Baseball is a game of mechanics. It's crazy how you just, talked about Jarren Duran changing his batting stance, and you just change one thing as a pitcher, 1 or 2 things as a pitcher, and all things start to fall into place. Maybe that's going to work for Winckowski. I like the guy. I don't, it's a shame that things worked out the way they did last year for him, where he just could not really get into a solid groove. I hope this year is different, and maybe that grip on his slider is going to make a world of difference for him.
Especially with that slider being his second most utilized pitch, 28.6% of the time, according to Baseball Savant. That's going to be huge. And, I think, this new stash brings him a little bit of swagger too as well. He spoke about how it sort of came about. He shaved his beard and then essentially his wife liked the stash. So he's like, I'll just keep it. Why not? And, a lot of the other players like it as well. But it's nice to see him have a little bit of that confidence going into this first full big league spring training. And, one of the biggest things that, looking at his splits that I thought was kind of weird, from the first inning to the second inning, had identical stats of 3.21 ERA, only allowing 5 earned runs. And then the third inning, 15.80 ERA, allowing 24 earned runs. So if he wants to be successful in the majors, like just plain and simple, you got to figure out how to pitch in the third inning. Because then when you look at the fourth, a 0.82 ERA with 1 earned run. If you're asking like how many innings, for each of these, it's an average of 11 to 13 innings for each of these different stats that I'm saying. And so it's not skewed whatsoever in terms of the sample size, but I just couldn't believe, the 24 earned runs in just the third inning alone. But very curious to see how just his performance in general is able to continue to help him get more of a bigger role with the team throughout this spring training. But there's going to be a lot of players that are going to be able to help the Red Sox ultimately be able to improve as well as surprise a lot of people going into this next season. And if you want to bet on some of the futures for the Red Sox, you can do that over on FanDuel. But looking right now, it's the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first best up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. And now looking at another player who has been talked about a lot as well as somebody who could slot into one of those rotation roles and has also been being raved about throughout this spring training thus far due to his impressive performance is Kutter Crawford. And, we talked about him a little bit in our last episode, but I think that he's the name that has been most talked about outside of Tanner Houck in terms of filling in one of those rotation spots.
He's definitely kind of my guy to make this roster now with the injuries. I think that he's shown a lot of really good things in spring training, and he's been, like you mentioned it, raved about. And Alex Cora and people on the Red Sox don't just say these things to make it look like that they like someone or that they have a good, they have good chemistry going. They hold each other accountable. They know when someone's not pitching well. And I think he's done really, really well up until this point. I hope that trend continues. I do hope he continues to get better because he could be a nice fill-in guy. He could also be somebody who makes it hard on Alex Cora when this team gets healthy to be like, okay, who do I take out? Who goes here? Who replaces who? It's probably going to get pretty not messy because I don't think it's not going to be dramatic or anything, but this could be a really difficult decision on Cora if things keep going the right way for him.
I think especially now that Crawford has a first MLB season under his belt, he knows sort of what didn't go right in his first season with the Sox in the majors, and maybe what he can improve upon. And I won't be surprised if throughout this past offseason he really looked sort of at the numbers, at the tape, and tried to work on improving the different things to be a dominant starter or reliever in the majors, because the numbers don't serve him too great, at least as a starter. He was 1 for 6 when he was on the mound, a 5.97 ERA with a 4.34 FIP over 13 starts. And the one thing that really stuck out to me, he allowed 11 home runs in 63.1 innings. And so that's one thing that I think he really needs to avoid, especially, when you're pitching at Fenway Park.
Oh, yeah.
Being able to stay away from allowing those home runs. And then ultimately just being able to have good control and get deep in the counts. I think that's one thing that we saw from him when he had great control. And I guess you could say this really about any pitcher. He was dominant on the mound and he was striking out guys left and right and wasn't really allowing a lot of ducks on the pond. And I think, in some of the starts where we saw him allow, 3 to 5 runs, he had 3 to 4 walks or so in some of those different starts. And so just being able to see consistency from Crawford, I think is going to be key, because he was sort of like Nick Pivetta, in my opinion. He would give you a great start and then he would blow up the next one.
You said ducks in the pond. I've never heard that. I've heard get all your ducks in a row, but ducks in the pond, I like that. I'm going to start using that. That's a good one. But yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with you. I think that much like Crawford, like this is another opportunity for somebody to showcase that they really could help this team. And even if it's not right away, they could help this team. If there's another injury that pops up, you always have September call-ups to look forward to. But
right.
if you can show that you've worked hard, that you are reliable, that you're steady, and that you can get batters out, I think, like I said, Alex Cora is going to have a lot of tough decisions to make. It's not going to be easy cutting anyone and sending anyone to Worcester and sending those people back to Worcester inevitably when this team gets healthy. So it's going to be fun. Like I said, we still have, three-ish weeks till opening day. So it's going to be, the pitching especially, it's going to be a lot of fun to keep our eyes on. And right now, as we're recording, Tanner Houck has like 3 strikeouts through 2 innings. So he's already looking really good. So that's good news. And now we just need, we need Crawford, we need Winckowski, Walter, Brayan. We need all these guys to come in here and kind of do that and show fans and show the Red Sox and show Alex Cora that they want to be part of this team and they want to do whatever they can do to make this roster.
And, anytime I think of Crawford, just sending him back down to Worcester, I remember when we went to our first Woo Sox game together and he allowed like 7 earned runs in his Woo Sox start and then went up to the Sox, a few days later and like shoved. And so like some pitchers, it helps going down to AAA and working on some things. Some it doesn't. But, you brought up some of the September call-ups, and there's 2 guys in particular that could, be able to get their chances before those specific September call-ups. And Brandon Walter's a guy who's not only a friend of the podcast, we've had him on multiple times. And so if you want to learn more about him, you can go over and check out that interview that we had with him this past offseason. But he's somebody who has had a lot of talk around his name, not only throughout, this spring training, but also going into the season as well. And interestingly enough, Baseball America rated his slider the best in the Red Sox system. He also has the best control in the Red Sox system. And it's pretty crazy because he averages a 1.1 walks per 9 innings last year, and over 180 innings overall in his career has only allowed 1.7 walks per 9. Incredible control.
And that's huge. We saw so much struggle last year when it came to Red Sox walking batters and how they just couldn't seem to really control their pitches. And then yes, it all has to translate into major league levels, right? But you already have Baseball America, which they do really good work over there. They're not just going to rate something for funsies. They're not going to sit here and be like, oh, well, we like this guy, so we're going to give it to him. Like they're watching film, they're comparing film and side by sides and doing everything that I wish I had patience for. But the control is the biggest thing I think that stands out to me, because last year, I don't know how many times we jumped on here venting about pitchers not having control and just seeing pitchers be all over the place. They couldn't get a good grip on the ball. They couldn't locate their pitches. So to see this, it's obviously very encouraging. I really hope we get a good look at him. I mean, September probably seems like the most logical, but Worcester's nice and close. Always go down to support Brandon Walter. But seeing the command that he has now, that's going to be huge for his growth and hopefully his confidence. Because if he keeps that control and that command over all of his pitches and can keep the numbers, where they are or even lower them, he's going to be a very solid major league pitcher.
And I think from what we saw, how well he did in Portland and how quickly the Red Sox called him up to Worcester after only 8 starts just shows how ready, I guess, he is for that big stage. Obviously, you're not going to know how well he's going to be able to do until he gets that debut, until he gets that opportunity. But from what we've seen thus far against, major league batters, he's done relatively well in spring training. Obviously, you can't put all your stock in that. But at the same time, I think especially with the limited amount of reps that he has had in AAA, I would like to see him get at least 10 starts under his belt, at least at the AAA level, just so then he's able to continue to develop his pitches a little bit better, continue to build up that experience against competitive and good hitters at a high level. And I think from what as well, we've seen a lot of fans, realizing he has a very similar sort of arm slot as Chris Sale, sort of that across the body slider as well. And I'm very excited to see sort of how he breaks camp, and if the Red Sox potentially, want to give him a full-fledged opportunity right out of camp and thinks that he's good enough to skip the AAA level.
Yeah, I don't think I'd love for that to happen. I love, when stuff like that does happen. I don't think that will. I think that they have enough depth that's already major league ready or very close to being major league ready that they won't want to rush anyone, especially someone if they want this person to be, or the specific person to be part of their organization long term, whether that's next year and then for a few years. But I think that they'll do whatever they can to keep developing these guys the right way. And hopefully we don't have a situation like last year where you're just looking through the farm system and be like, all right, he's close enough, or he's the closest to being major league ready. Let's just get him up here. I think that there won't be, Andrew Benintendi skipping AAA or anything like that. I think it's going to be not slow and steady, but it's going to be a comfortable pace to get these guys where they should be.
I think Mata, fits perfectly in that as well. Coming back from TJ last season and really only had, a few starts in AAA and struggled a little bit at that level. But Alex Cora has sort of given Mata his vote of confidence, saying that, he'll be a part of this team staff at some point in 2023. And you brought it up already in this episode. Cora's words, don't take them lightly. You know what I mean? He means what he says. And so we've seen, Mata pitched 2 innings thus far out of relief throughout spring training, 1 walk, 3 strikeouts. And from what we saw in Portland, very intriguing, a 1.85 ERA, 10.7 Ks per 9. But the walks is something that he really struggled with, not only in Portland, but also in Worcester. 4.3 walks per 9 in Portland, but also in Worcester, a 5 walks per 9. And the one thing that I noticed from the starts that I at least saw live with the Woo Sox, he was able to strike out batters very effectively, but he got behind in the count in almost every single up at bat. And so, you know, sometimes that bites you in the butt where, you know, you get 3-2 and you're able to strike them out and you know, we got the out. But, you know, if you continuously do that, you know, those walks are going to start piling up, and especially in the majors, you got to be pinpoint.
Yeah, you don't want to fall behind in counts. You don't want to jack up your pitch count because you're getting behind every single count. But there is a lot to like about Mata, especially though there's been a lot of hype around him for a long time. And then he had the Tommy John surgery. So it's been a little bit of a setback, obviously, for him. But, you know, this year, Alex Cora said that he's going to be part of our roster at some point. I'm interpreting that as September. But to see like the progress he's made over the last year and to see what he did last year, especially. But I would love if he just stopped falling behind in those counts because, like you said, it could come back to bite you. Even if you get out of it, you're still throwing more pitches than you probably want to, and maybe you're just kind of working yourself up. But I think that those are things that he will correct in the minors, or you hope that he corrects while he's in the minors. But this is the year of Brayan Mata watch, I think, and not necessarily to get him into the Red Sox organization, but to see him really build up as a pitcher and kind of see the future of the Red Sox. We're going to see a lot of intriguing prospects this year that the Red Sox have in their system.
And I think the whole role aspect is going to be very interesting as well. You know, is Mata more of a starter or a bullpen piece? And, you know, maybe if you consistently see him get behind in the count and stack up those walks, maybe he's more of a, you know, long reliever or bullpen piece. And, you know, being able to identify sort of those roles early on to help a guy be able to strategically prepare for the season is very critical, but you don't know that without sort of the evidence that points to that specifically. And so the Red Sox will, you know, be able to make some of those decisions throughout this season and also potentially be able to give some of these guys a shot to show what they have at the major league level. But I put out on Twitter sort of a question of what guys you could see the Red Sox filling in the rotation spots for Paxton, Whitlock, and Bello. And you know, we had J God Sports. He said Houck / Winckowski. We had Andy Fabano. He said Tanner Houck has always been a lock in the rotation for me. Then we had Ben. I'm not going to say his app because not very appropriate for the program, but I go with Walter over Mata personally for this. And then we also had a few other people say Walter over Mata, like Sox optimist as well. And so I think in a lot of people's mind, you know, people see Walter more having upside than Mata, which makes sense, especially not only with his age but his experience, you know, in the minors. And you know, it hurts Mata a little bit with that Tommy John surgery and having to recover throughout a year. But I'm very excited to see not only how, you know, both Walter and Mata, but also all these different players are able to perform and really where they ultimately end up at the end of spring training. But we're going to keep you posted about everything that's happening leading up to opening day on this podcast. We're posting 5 days a week, and we actually have two very special guests planned over the next 2 days. I'm gonna tell you the first one because it's going to be coming out on Thursday, but Red Sox beat writer for Boston Globe, Alex Spear, is going to be coming on the show. That episode is going to be posted on Thursday. So if you have any questions for him, make sure to follow us over on Twitter. It's LO_Red Sox. I'm going to be putting out a tweet sort of asking what questions or topics you want me to ask Alex. So if you have anything in mind, go over and respond to that tweet when we put it out over the next few hours or so to make sure that not only your question, your topic, but also I'll mention your name as well in the episode to be able to give you credit for that specific topic or question. But we want to thank you so much as always for making Locked On Red Sox your first listen of every single day. Now make your second listen and check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Baseball wherever you get your podcasts and over on YouTube. Also, make sure to follow myself on Twitter. It's @JakeIggy, and also Lauren. It's 3 laws, Lauren with 4 R's. But we greatly appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, we hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we'll end it how we always end it. Keep the faith and let's go Sox. Peace.